Hi, this is Bill Stapleton, Deputy Principal of Seaview High School. This video today is going to be all about the South Australian Certificate of Education. It will give some information about what the SACE is, how students achieve their SACE, how the ATAR is calculated from their SACE results, and also talk about some of the SACE processes such as moderation and scaling. So first of all, I'm just going to talk about what the SACE actually is. So the SACE stands for the South Australian Certificate of Education. It's basically the tip of the education iceberg. So it's what the students work towards from the time they start at reception. The SACE is recognised worldwide. Currently the SACE is undertaken by students in South Australia, the Northern Territory, China, Malaysia and a couple of other places around the world. It's very well recognised, very well respected, and it is being modelled in a number of other states and countries around the world as well. It's a verification that a student has both completed and passed Year 12. So a student can get to the end of Year 12 and complete their Year 12 without achieving their SACE, and so it's different from just completing Year 12. So how do you get the SACE? Well, students must achieve what's called 200 credits worth of subjects. 110 of these credits are compulsory. The other 90 are what are called free option. So generally, any time a student studies a subject for one semester, which is 2 terms, they will get 10 SACE credits. At Year 11, those are called Stage 1 credits. At Year 12, they're generally called Stage 2 credits. So if a student does 7 subjects in Semester 1 and Semester 2 of Year 11, they will already end up with 140 SACE credits by the end of Year 11. So what are credits? So each subject is awarded credits based on how long it is. All right. The Year 12 subjects are 20 credits. I already explained that Year 11 subjects, because they're semester long, are 10 credits. Subjects do fall into one of 2 categories, Stage 1 or Stage 2, and the compulsory subjects go across both Stage 1 and Stage 2. One of the things that is really useful for both parents and students when you're starting to look at the SACE and mapping out your future subjects that you're going to be doing for your future pathway, whether that's TAFE or a university pathway or onto an apprenticeship, is to use this SACE planner over on the side here. Now, if you just Google SACE planner, you'll find this document, and it's really useful to have a look at. What you can do is basically fill in each of the subjects that you're doing through here. These ones up the top, the green, the purple and the yellow ones, are the compulsory subjects. So these are the ones that a student has to do. And then these are the 90 credits down the bottom. It's kind of set up so that every box is 10 credits. So if you have a look through here, you'll add up a total of 200 credits down the bottom. Okay. You can probably use this at course counselling if you want, but like I said, it's just a good way for you to keep track of what you're doing at Year 12 and Year 11 and check that you're on the right SACE pathway to get your SACE. The compulsory subjects students have to do. Okay, normally we start at Year 10 with the personal learning plan. So that's 10 credits. At Year 10 currently at the moment, we are also doing research practices, which will give the students another 10 SACE credits. That is not compulsory though. They have literacy subjects they have to do at Year 11, and the Stage 1 literacy subjects are Essential English, English and English as an additional language or dialect. They have to choose this for a full year at Year 11, which is why it's 20 credits, so it's 2 semesters worth. They also have to, at Year 11, choose a numeracy subject of 10 credits. So in Semester 1, they choose either Essential Maths, General Maths or Math Methods. And then they can choose that for Semester 2 if they want, but it's not compulsory. For Stage 2, they have to choose Research Project for 10 credits. Now we do that at Year 11 here at Seaview as well. And they have to do 60 credits of Stage 2 subjects. Now if you remember, every Stage 2 subject is 20 credits worth, so this is the equal of 3 Year 12 subjects. This compulsory Stage 2 subjects of 60 credits can be replaced by a VET course, normally a Certificate 3. Most Certificate 3 courses award around about 50 to 70 SACE credits, so sometimes students can actually achieve their SACE without ever studying a Year 12 subject apart from a research project. Now with all of these compulsory subjects, a student has to pass them. And a pass is defined as a C or higher result at Stage 1 and a C minus or higher at Stage 2. So even if a student ends up with 300 SACE credits, if they do not achieve a passing grade in these compulsories, they will not get their SACE. And so we place a very high importance, obviously, on their PLP, their English subjects and their math subjects at Year 11, and then their research project and Stage 2 subjects as well, ensuring that the student passes in order to achieve their SACE. All right. So please, please, please make sure you understand that if you do not pass compulsories, you will not get your SACE. Now, the free choice subjects makes up the other 90 credits that a student can do. These can be from vet courses as well. Okay, I said some of those stage 2 credits can be a Cert 3 course. If they're doing a Cert 1 or 2 course or a Cert 3 in retail, that can make up their flexible 90 credits to get their SACE as well. And as I've said, by the time they finish year 11, most students already have 160 stage 1 credits, which is because they've done 140 at year 11. Okay, they've got their PLP and they've got their research practices from stage 1 in year 10, or they may also have 10 credits of their research project. So pretty much all they have to do in year 12 is choose a minimum of 3 subjects, and we always say 4 because that allows them to achieve their ATAR, which I'll talk about later. But they only have to focus on these year 12 subjects and passing those in order to get their SACE. If you want to have a look at a breakdown of how the SACE is split up, in this graph here, you'll see that we've got PLP of 10 credits, Stage 1 English of 20 credits, Numeracy 10 credits, Research Project 10 credits, Stage 2 subjects of 60, okay, and then we've got flexible options over here of 90 credits, and all up that will make 200 credits for our SACE. A student can certainly go over that as well, which is not a problem, and a lot of our students do. We call that our safety net, just in case there's any issues around them needing to drop a subject or not able to complete it due to health reasons or family reasons or things like that. So that's a brief overview of what the SACE is in terms of the credits required, the compulsory subjects they have to study. And so assuming a student has got through to the end of year 12, they've met all the compulsory subjects and they have done their minimum of 4 year 12 subjects in order to attain an ATAR, they can then look at doing some tertiary study using the SACE. So in order to do tertiary study, and by tertiary study here I'm referring primarily to university, if a student's interested in TAFE or an apprenticeship, that's slightly different, and I'm not going to cover that in this video. I'm going to cover purely looking at really going on to university. So a student, if they've done those stage 2 subjects we've talked about, they will get 90 stage 2 credits. That's 4 year 12 subjects and the research project. So this makes up what we call their aggregate. Okay, so if a student chooses to do 5 subjects at year 12, then this can replace the research project in here, but this is the normal pattern that we suggest for students. What can happen is that a Cert 3 vet course, as I mentioned earlier, can be used towards their SACE, and it can also be used towards the aggregate for their ATAR. So a Cert 3 vet course, even though it may be equal to 60 or 70 credits at stage 2, it will only count for 20 credits when we're looking at an ATAR. So that means it will replace one of these full year stage 2 subjects. So they could do research project, 3 year 12 subjects, and their vet course, and that will make up the 90 credits for their aggregate for their ATAR. Now what happens with those 90 credits is they get converted into what's called the Australian Tertiary Admissions Ranking. So the aggregate score is used to rank all students in the state, or in fact all students who are undertaking the SACE, so any of those in Northern Territory and Malaysia and China as well. Okay, and they use those to rank those students in the system out of 100, which is why we get the Australian Tertiary Admissions Ranking. Any bonus points the students receive are added to the aggregate and not the ATAR. So I'll talk about how students can get bonus points a little bit later, but I might just show you about how we calculate a student's aggregate and how we convert that into an ATAR. So the first example here, we've got a student who's doing 4 year 12 subjects plus their research project. So they've done photography, health, math studies, English as an additional language or dialect, and research project. Now, the first thing I should probably talk about is how a student gets this score out of 20, because if you know anything about the Australian curriculum, you'll know that students are graded A to E. In year 12 for the SACE, they are graded A plus to E minus. And so what that means is that at the end of year 12, a student gets a grade from an A plus down to E minus. Now, A plus to E minus is basically 15 letters. So what will initially happen is a student will get a score out of 15. So an A minus, for example, might be about a 12 out of 15. That then gets converted to a score out of 20 just by dividing by 15 and timesing by 20. So that's why we can see here that this student has a C+ here, a C+, a D-, a C, and a C for research project. So this student has actually met all the compulsory requirements of the SACE. They have passed 3 Year 12 subjects, which is EALD, health, and photography. They've passed all of those. They've passed their research project. So this student has achieved their SACE. However, their ATAR, all right, is really quite low because their aggregate, when you add up all of these scores, is 40.80. And when that gets converted using the ATAR conversion table, which I'll show you a bit later, that ends up to be an ATAR of only 36.65. Now, the ATAR is a ranking. So what that means is that if you have an ATAR of 36.65, you're in the bottom 36.65% of all students who have completed the SACE. So obviously, the higher your ATAR, the higher your ranking. So a student who gets an ATAR of 91 is in the top 9% of all students who get their SACE. So the highest ATAR you can achieve is 99.95 because that puts you in the top 0.05% of all students. What you might notice on this screen is that a student's score, even though they got a C+ for photography and health, their score is quite different. And that's what's due to something called scaling, and I'm going to explain that a little bit later. But it's important to understand that not every subject and the grade you get in every subject necessarily equates to the same grade. So it's really important to understand that. But what is also important to understand is that just passing your subjects at Year 12 will not really guarantee you entry into university. Most university courses have a minimum ATAR of about 60 or 70. And so you can see here that this student with their aggregate of 40.80, they've passed, they've got their SACE, but their ATAR is not going to be high enough to get them into any of their preferred university courses. So let's have a look at a different example. This student here has done chemistry, physics, math studies, biology, specialist maths, and research projects. So they've actually done 5 Year 12 subjects plus their research project. You can see their grades that they've got here. Okay, and you can see that there's a little bit of difference between the A's again. Now, what will happen when you've got more than your 90 credits is the SATAC will automatically calculate your best overall aggregate. So looking at these subjects here, physics of 18.6 out of 20 is actually the lowest score for this student, and so is specialist maths at 18.6. So what will happen, probably because it will just go alphabetically, they would add up the chemistry score, physics, math studies, and biology, plus the research project, because that gives the best overall aggregate out of 90. The aggregate of 86.5 then translates to an ATAR of 99.20. So this student is actually in the top 0.8% of all students who do the SACE. Final example here, we've got another student. This time they're doing some music subjects, which are out of 10 credits. Okay, but again, adding up all the different grades gives them an aggregate of 80.30 and an ATAR of 95. Okay, the research project is really, really important in terms of it can make quite a difference to a student's ATAR, which is why we really encourage the students to take it seriously and do the best they can, get the highest possible score they can at Year 11 to set themselves up for that high ATAR. Now, I did talk about bonus points before, and bonus points are something that SATAC offers to students to recognise either the courses that they have undergone or individual circumstances that they may face in Year 12. So these are applied to the aggregate before the ATAR is calculated, and I'll show you why that's so important in a minute. You can get bonus points for studying a number of subjects, and currently at the moment at Seaview, if you do Stage 2 English, math methods, specialist maths, Japanese or Chinese, you can get 2 bonus points per subject. So if a student's studying both math methods and specialist maths, they'll get the maximum of 4 bonus points. If a student was studying math methods, specialist maths and Chinese, they would still only get 4 bonus points maximum. There is also another 5 bonus points which a student can get for what's called individual circumstances. Now those individual circumstances, alright, is if a student or their parents are getting income support, like Centrelink, if a student or their parents have a healthcare or pension concession card, and if a student or their family is on a school card. Any of those situations, when a student is going through and applying through SATAC for their university entry, they can apply for the bonus points. What's really important to understand is that the school cannot apply for these bonus points on your behalf. We can certainly help you in applying for them when you're doing SATAC, but we cannot apply for them for you. The subjects you're doing, however, like they said, those math methods, specialist maths, those will automatically get added to your aggregate. But these bonus points being added on has to be applied for by you. Now, to show you why bonus points can be so beneficial, if a student received an aggregate of 69, that would equate to an ATAR of about 80.35, and this is using last year's conversions. If we apply those 4 bonus points for the subjects, that takes their aggregate from 69 to 73, and their ATAR from 80.35 to 85.75. So just a little bit of an increase. But if they then get the 5 bonus points as well, the aggregate goes from 69 to 78. Their ATAR goes from 80.35 to 92.05, which is a really, really big jump. So 9 bonus points equates to over about 12 points increase on your ATAR. This is why some students who perhaps get an aggregate which is about maybe 85, 86, their conversion gets them up to an ATAR of 99.95, so it gets them into that top category. So they are really, really useful and beneficial, particularly when you're applying for the really highly competitive university courses like medicine or law that require really high ATARs. So what I always say to students though, and it's good for parents to hear this as well, is that bonus points are exactly that. They are a bonus. So do not count on them to get you over the line. Use them as a bonus to bump up your ATAR. Now, the final thing I want to talk about that can affect a student's grade at the end of year 12 is a couple of SACE processes. So there are 2 main processes used by the SACE board that can potentially affect a student's subject grade and therefore their ATAR at the end. So the first one is called moderation and the second one is called scaling. Now, as we go through this, I want you to know that all Year 12 teachers undertake an online training course called Plato every year to keep them up to date with the latest SACE marking and moderation processes, and also to make sure that they are well on track with the level and standard expected by the SACE board. So in terms of moderation, moderation is done to ensure that the grade a student receives at Seaview is the same standard as a student at any other SACE school. So we want to make sure that if a student is in a PE class here and they're getting a B- for their volleyball practical, that is the same standard as, say, a student at Sacred Heart or St. Peter's in the city or Brighton. If they were doing volleyball, that would be the exact same grade that they have as well. So it's a way of ensuring the equality of teaching assessment across all schools who undertake the SACE. So what normally happens is that the teachers at the end of the year have to send samples of student work into the SACE board, and they get looked at compared to all the other student work from across the state and obviously other countries, and to make sure they are at the same standard. So if there's a class of 25, normally that would mean about 8 to 10 samples of student work will be sent in for moderation. They look at all the different grade bands from A+ down to E-. Those students' work that is sent in will affect the grades of all the other students in the class. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So if this was looking at the sample of work that was sent in, so there was 1A, 3 Bs, 3 Cs and 2 Ds, okay, they would have a look at the student work for the A. If they were happy that it was an A, it would stay at an A. What they would do for the 3 Bs is they would have a look at each of the grades for each of the students' work that was awarded a B. If they have a look at them and they see that 2 out of 3 are in fact Bs and one of them was perhaps an A grade, because the majority, over 50% of the samples, are still in the B grade category, every student's work would receive a B. So unfortunately, that student who's at an A grade, even though it's at an A grade because their teacher marked them at a B grade, they would receive a B for the work. Likewise, 3 students had a C grade here. 2 of the 3 C grades were actually at a B grade, but one of them was at a C. So there was 1 C and actually 2 Ds in here. Now, unfortunately, again, because over 50% of the students' work is at a lower level, all of the Cs in the student cohorts, even any that weren't sent in for moderation, would go down to a D. So this is really, really important, and this is something that students have absolutely no control over. This is all on the teachers and making sure that they get it right. Now, I'm very proud to say that at Seaview, our moderation is exceptional, and our teachers' work is always coming back saying we have the right grades for our students. So it's nothing that they need to worry about. That's just purely on the teacher, making sure they know the standards and getting the grades right. But this is why it's really important, all right? So to make sure that, for example, a teacher at another school who maybe perhaps marks their students too easily, that again goes back in line, so it doesn't mean that their student gets a higher ATAR than our student does. The other thing that the SACE board does is scaling. Now, scaling is where the grade in one subject is changed so that it makes the distribution of grades across all subjects equal. So what I mean by that is that normally what they try to do is get a bell curve distribution of grades. So what that means is the majority of grades should sit around about the B- or C+ grade. You'll have some A pluses and you'll have some E minuses. So normally for each subject, they want a certain percentage of A's in there to make it equal, because you don't want, say, a subject like, I'm just using the ones here, PE, for example, where 50% of the students who do PE in all of the SACE get an A+, but only 5% of the students in music get an A+, because all SACE subjects are equal, and there's an equal amount of effort and work, and obviously it's slightly different the work they have to do, but the SACE board, through the curriculum they have developed and the assessment that has to be done, have made the subjects on about an equal par. So you don't want one subject getting a lot more because simply, for example, it might have been a little bit easier. So what they would do is they would scale back the number of A's for PE, and they would make the grade, the score out of 20 that you have to get an A bit higher. It changes each year depending upon the results of all the students who are doing the SACE. So it does change year to year. So sometimes you might hear people say, oh, don't choose food and hospitality because it gets scaled down, or choose chemistry because it gets scaled up. That's a misconception. It changes year to year. Sometimes chemistry scores may get scaled down depending upon the cohort. So it's really important that you don't choose subjects based upon scaling, but you just do it based upon what's good for your future career pathway. So an example of this, and you saw this earlier when we were looking at the students, is that it's an A- for biology, and these were all results from a previous year. So an A- for biology was equal to a 13.3 out of 15, whereas an A- in visual art was 12.5 out of 15. An A- in specialist maths was 12.8 out of 15, and an A- in integrated learning was actually 13.4 out of 15. So based upon this, you would actually recommend that a student does integrated learning, because that's the one where an A- gets them their highest score. However, what we always recommend is that you choose a subject that you're going to do the best in. Okay. Yes. Okay. The specialist maths might perhaps get scaled down in this case a little bit. Okay. But if you're already going to get an A in specialist maths and the most you can get is a B in integrated learning, then that scaling still isn't going to make up the difference between that grade. So it's really strongly recommended that students, again, always choose the subjects they're interested in and are for their career pathway, not based on scaling or anything else. So that's a bit of an introduction to the SACE. I hope it makes sense. I really strongly recommend that you go to the SACE website, which is www.sace.sa.edu.au. There's loads of information there for students and for parents, which gives more information. The SACE board also has their own YouTube channel with some YouTube videos on there as well, and I suggest you have a look at those. If you have any questions, please contact the school on 8377 8000. I'd be more than happy to chat with you. Thank you, and I hope you have a better understanding of the SACE.